It was a quiet Saturday morning in Willow Creek, a neighborhood known for its manicured lawns, clean streets, and strict homeowners association. The sun was just rising, casting golden light over the rows of identical houses. Birds chirped happily, and the faint smell of fresh coffee drifted from open windows. Mariah Johnson stepped out of her modest, newly bought home, carrying a basket of laundry. Her heart was light, her mind calm, and for a moment everything seemed perfect. Her daughter, little Ava, skipped beside her, holding a small doll, her laughter filling the air. Mariah waved at the neighbors as she walked down the sidewalk. Everyone seemed busy with their own routines. Joggers passing by, mail carriers humming tunes, and a man watering his garden. It was a scene she had dreamt about when she and her husband, James, had bought this house. Life had been hectic lately, with James often away on army assignments, but today promised peace. She let herself smile, imagining a quiet, safe morning with Ava before chores and errands. Across the street, Karen Whitmore stood on her porch, arms crossed, observing. Karen was the president of the HOA and had a reputation for being difficult. She wore oversized sunglasses and her lips pressed together in a tight line. To her, rules were not just guidelines, they were law. And to Karen, the smallest infraction was a personal challenge she needed to conquer. She watched as Mariah and Ava strolled past, noting every detail, the angle of the laundry basket, the way Ava skipped slightly off the curb. Karen's eyes narrowed. There was always something to correct, some imperfection to point out. "Morning, Karen," Mariah called cheerfully, trying to bridge the invisible wall of tension. Karen's head tilted slightly and she nodded, her lips barely moving. "Make sure your dog stays on the leash," she said, though Mariah had no dog outside. Her tone was sharp, almost threatening. Mariah blinked, taken aback. "I don't have a dog out here," she said softly. But Karen had already turned her attention back to the street. Mariah sighed and shook her head. She had heard stories about Karen, the neighborhood enforcer, as some residents called her, quietly behind closed doors. Mariah had hoped to avoid her attention, but it seemed impossible. She kept walking, holding Ava's hand tightly, feeling a small wave of unease settle over her. Back inside her house, Mariah tried to distract herself with chores. She sorted laundry, folded clothes, and hummed a quiet tune to keep Ava entertained. Life felt fragile in moments like these, peaceful yet tense, ordinary yet uncertain. She thought about James, who had been away for a month on deployment. He was usually the protector, the one who made her feel safe. But now, without him home, every little interaction, every sharp look from neighbors like Karen carried weight. Later, Mariah stepped out to check the mailbox. The sun was higher now, and the neighborhood seemed alive with morning energy. Children played on driveways, sprinklers sprayed arcs of water, and cars rolled past. She smiled at the simple beauty of it, inhaling the fresh air. But her smile faltered when she noticed Karen standing near the mailbox, her arms crossed like a judge ready to pass sentence. Karen's gaze followed Mariah intently. Every step Mariah took seemed to irritate her. The woman's obsession with control was palpable, almost suffocating. Mariah felt her chest tighten, a small growing fear bubbling inside her. She reminded herself, stay calm, don't engage. But deep down she knew this quiet morning would not remain peaceful for long. As Mariah returned home, she glanced back. Karen's eyes met hers, and in that moment, Mariah sensed something dark lurking beneath the surface, a storm about to break in a place where calm had always seemed guaranteed. Mariah didn't know it yet, but this day, which had begun so innocently, would soon turn into one of the most frightening, painful experiences of her life. The morning had seemed peaceful, but that calm would soon shatter. Mariah parked her car carefully in her assigned spot, double-checking the lines on the pavement. She wanted to avoid any unnecessary attention from Karen or anyone else in the HOA. She stepped out, holding Ava's hand, the little girl skipping happily beside her. The sunlight reflected off the car's windshield, warming Mariah's shoulders. Everything felt normal, until Karen appeared storming across the street with quick, sharp steps. "You can't park like that," Karen shouted, her voice slicing through the quiet morning. Her sunglasses reflected the sun, hiding her eyes, but her anger was unmistakable. "It's against HOA rules." Mariah froze for a moment, holding the basket of groceries she had just brought inside. "I'm in my assigned spot," she said softly, trying to keep her voice calm. "I checked with the HOA office yesterday. This spot is mine." Karen's face turned crimson. "I don't care what the office said," she barked. Rules are rules, and you are breaking them. She took a step closer, her finger pointing at Mariah with sharp precision. Ava clung to her mother's side, her small hand gripping Mariah's skirt. Mariah took a deep breath. Karen, please. I'm following the rules exactly. There's no need to escalate this. Her voice was steady, but inside her heart thudded with fear. Something in Karen's stance made her uneasy. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, like a storm gathering in the distance. Karen's hand moved quickly. In her grip was a small canister Mariah hadn't noticed before. Her heart sank. Pepper spray. Before Mariah could react, Karen pressed the nozzle. A sharp burning spray hit Mariah squarely in the eyes. Pain exploded across her face and she stumbled backward, coughing violently. Tears blurred her vision as the world became a haze of bright sunlight and searing pain. Ava screamed, "Mommy, Mommy!" and pressed herself against her mother's side. Mariah dropped the basket and instinctively covered her face with her hands, gasping for air. Her eyes felt like they were on fire, her throat raw and stinging. Every breath burned. The smell of the chemical filled her nose, making her dizzy and weak. Panic surged through her. She had never imagined something like this could happen in her quiet suburban neighborhood. Neighbors poured out of their houses as the commotion grew. Some shouted at Karen to stop, while others ran to help Mariah and her daughter. One elderly woman grabbed a wet towel and rushed to wipe Mariah's face, while another neighbor called 911. The scene was chaotic, full of fear, confusion, and disbelief. Karen stood there, frozen for a moment as she watched Mariah collapse against the curb. Then she straightened as if proud of what she had done. "I told you to follow the rules," she shouted, her voice cold and sharp, ignoring the cries and chaos around her. Mariah struggled to speak, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you do this?" she gasped, her body shaking from the pain and shock. It was then that James Johnson appeared, running down the street in his army uniform. His eyes widened as he took in the scene. His wife on the ground, tears and chemical burns on her face, their daughter screaming and clinging to her mother. His heart pounded, a mixture of fear, anger, and protectiveness flooding through him. Without thinking, he pushed through the crowd and knelt beside Mariah. "Mariah, are you okay? Can you breathe?" His voice was firm but filled with terror. He pulled her close, shielding her with his body while trying to calm Ava. Karen froze, finally noticing the man in uniform. Her lips parted as if she had suddenly realized she had made a grave mistake. James's glare pierced her, cold and commanding. "You just attacked my wife," he said, his voice low but threatening. "Do you even know who I am?" Karen's eyes widened. I was just enforcing the rules," she stammered, panic beginning to creep into her voice. James helped Mariah to her feet, his hands steady and strong. "You made a huge mistake," he said firmly, "and you will be held responsible." His presence radiated authority, and for the first time that morning, Karen felt fear where she had only felt power. The neighbors watched silently, tension hanging thick in the air. Mariah's pain burned her body, but seeing James there gave her a small glimmer of relief. She clutched Ava's hand tightly, feeling the protective strength of her husband, and the first threads of hope began to weave through the fear. The street was filled with chaos. Neighbors crowded around, some shouting, others frozen in shock. The air still burned with the scent of pepper spray, sharp and overwhelming. Mariah's eyes streamed tears, her face red and stinging, while Ava clung to her side, trembling. Every step Mariah took sent waves of pain through her body, but she tried to stand, leaning heavily on James for support. James kept his arm around Mariah, his other hand gently holding Ava. His uniform was now speckled with a few drops of the spray as he moved her to the sidewalk, away from Karen. His mind raced not just with anger but with concern. Mariah was in pain, and he felt helpless in the moment before he could take control. He could hear Ava's quiet sobs and felt a burning mix of fear and fury rise inside him. "One, please."
"We need help!"
one neighbor shouted into their phone. Others fetched towels and bottles of water, trying to wash away the burning chemicals. The community that had seemed so calm moments ago now resembled a battlefield. People whispered in shock, asking each other why something like this could happen in their peaceful neighborhood. Karen stood a few feet away, her hand still shaking from holding the pepper spray. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She looked around at the faces of the neighbors, shocked, angry, disapproving, and felt an unfamiliar twinge Fear. Her voice quivered as she tried to explain herself. I was just enforcing the rules. You have to follow the rules. Mariah, gasping and blinking rapidly, tried to respond. You didn't have to hurt me. Or my daughter. Her voice was weak, hoarse from the burning spray, but it carried the weight of disbelief and pain. Ava tugged at her mother's sleeve, hiding her small face behind her mother's arm. It was at that moment that James fully realized the danger of the situation. His eyes, usually calm and steady from years in the army, flashed with controlled anger. He stepped closer to Karen, his presence instantly commanding silence. Do you know what you've done? He said, his voice low, even, but powerful enough to make Karen's knees wobble. Karen stammered, James's gaze didn't leave her. You attacked my wife. My daughter saw it. And you have no idea what you've just done. His tone was steady, but the raw emotion beneath it made every word feel heavy and serious. The neighbors could sense the authority radiating from him, a calm power that demanded respect. One of the neighbors, an older man, stepped forward. Karen, you've gone too far, he said. This isn't about rules anymore. You hurt a family. Karen's face turned pale, her usual bravado crumbling. She opened her mouth to respond, but the crowd's collective stare seemed to swallow her words. She suddenly felt small, powerless, and for the first time in a long while, afraid. Meanwhile, James carefully guided Mariah to a nearby bench. He knelt beside her, gently dabbing her eyes with a wet towel while trying to calm Ava. Mariah's chest heaved as she coughed and wiped her stinging face. Her fear and pain slowly mingled with relief. Relief that her husband was there, strong and steady, protecting her and their daughter. You're safe now, James whispered to Mariah, his voice softening. He looked over at the neighbors. She'll be held accountable. This won't go unpunished. Karen swallowed hard, finally realizing that her actions had crossed a line she could never undo. The chaos had ended physically, but the emotional damage, the shock, and the fear lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Mariah clutched James's arm, feeling his strength and comfort, and allowed herself to lean on him. Ava's small hand remained tightly in hers, holding on as if the connection could protect them from everything. The morning that had begun so peacefully had ended in fear, anger, and pain. But amid the confusion, one thing was certain. Mariah and her family would not be broken. Their love and unity stood stronger than the harm inflicted by one woman's cruelty. And for Karen, this moment marked the beginning of consequences she could never escape. James Johnson's eyes blazed with a controlled fury as he stood in front of Karen. His army uniform gave him an air of authority, but it was his presence, calm yet unyielding, that silenced the murmurs of neighbors around them. He had been trained to face danger calmly, to assess situations, and to protect his team. And right now, Mariah and Ava were his team. The sight of his wife's pain, her tears, and the fear in his daughter's eyes stirred a storm inside him. Karen finally met his gaze and faltered. The anger she had wielded so confidently just moments ago now seemed feeble. She stammered, I was just enforcing the rules. Her voice lacked conviction. James's voice was steady, deep, and unwavering. You just attacked my wife. My daughter saw it. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done? He stepped closer, his presence imposing but not threatening physically. His words alone carried weight, like commands from someone used to obedience in life or death situations. Karen's hands shook. For the first time, she realized she was not in control. Her power, which had been her shield in the neighborhood, was stripped away. The neighbors watched silently, holding their breath. Some muttered softly among themselves, amazed at the strength emanating from this man in uniform, a protector not just by title but by instinct. James crouched beside Mariah, gently dabbing her face with a damp towel. You're okay now, love. The pain will pass, he whispered, his voice softening with care. Mariah leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the strength in his arms, and the unwavering support that no pepper spray or anger could break. Ava, still clutching her doll, peeked out from behind her mother, her eyes wide and trusting. James looked back at Karen. You've made a serious mistake, he said firmly, and there will be consequences. Hurting a family, assaulting someone in broad daylight, and causing fear to a child. This is not just about HOA rules anymore. This is about accountability. Karen's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Fear replaced the arrogance she had worn like armor for years. She had underestimated the strength of the people she thought were beneath her, and now she felt small, exposed, and powerless. A neighbor stepped forward, shaking their head. "Karen, enough. You went too far. This is not about parking or rules anymore. You hurt someone and their child saw it." Their voice trembled with both anger and relief, witnessing the moment of reckoning. James helped Mariah to stand fully. Her legs were weak and her face still burned from the spray, but her husband's presence steadied her. He took Ava's hand in his, giving the little girl a reassuring squeeze. "We're safe now," he said, his voice carrying both authority and comfort. Mariah felt a surge of gratitude and love for him. He had arrived not just as her husband, but as a shield against the world's cruelty. Karen finally took a step back, as if distancing herself from the reality she had created. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this, the confrontation with someone who would not bow, who would protect his family at all costs, was something she had never anticipated. James looked around at the neighbors. "This family will be okay, but know this. Actions have consequences. Respect, kindness, and humanity matter more than rules enforced without heart." His voice resonated through the street, and the crowd seemed to absorb the lesson. Mariah rested against James's shoulder, her tears slowly subsiding. Ava clung to her mother, finally calming as if sensing that danger had passed. The morning that had started with sunlight and peace had turned into chaos and fear. Yet in the eye of that storm, a family had stood united, stronger than the cruelty aimed at them. James's gaze lingered on Karen for a moment, not with hatred but with firm resolve. She would face the consequences, and the neighborhood would learn that no amount of self-righteousness could overpower love, courage, and integrity. In that moment, Mariah realized something powerful. No matter how dark or violent the world seemed, they had each other, and that was enough to survive anything. The chaos of that morning lingered in the air like smoke. Mariah sat on the edge of her sofa, still dabbing her burning eyes with a damp cloth. Ava, tired from the shock and fear, lay curled up beside her, clutching her mother's hand as if that small connection could keep the world from hurting them again. James sat across the room, his posture rigid, still processing the anger that had surged through him earlier. His military training had taught him to remain calm, but nothing could have fully prepared him for seeing his wife assaulted in their own neighborhood. The phone rang incessantly. Neighbors checked in, bringing food, towels, and words of comfort. Some whispered apologies for Karen's behavior. Others expressed disbelief that such a thing could happen in a quiet suburban street. Mariah's heart swelled with gratitude. Despite the fear and pain, she realized she was not alone. Her family was surrounded by people who cared. James held Mariah's hand, his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. "You'll be okay," he said softly. "I promise. We'll handle this together." Mariah looked at him, her eyes still red from the spray, and nodded. There were no words that could fully express the mix of fear, pain, and relief she felt. She had survived, but the emotional scars would take longer to fade. Meanwhile, the police had arrived to take statements. Karen was questioned, her usual arrogance replaced by a nervous tremor. She tried to explain herself, but no words could undo what she had done. Witnesses spoke of the attack, the chaos, and the fear she had caused. The officers noted every detail, from the pepper spray canister in her hand to the panic on Ava's face. Karen's position in the community, once secure, now began to crumble. As the day progressed, Mariah's pain slowly subsided with the help of cool compresses and water. She sat on the porch with Ava, letting the little girl play quietly nearby while she caught her breath. The sunlight warmed her face, but she couldn't shake the lingering sense of violation. Her home, a place she had thought safe, had been shattered in a matter of minutes. James sat beside her, holding her close. "This is not your fault," he whispered. "Karen made a terrible choice, and now she will face the consequences. You were brave, Mariah. You stayed calm, and you protected Ava as best you could." Mariah let out a shaky breath. She knew he was right, but the memory of pain still lingered. Yet his presence reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting even when afraid. By evening, the neighborhood had begun to respond. Emails and messages circulated, expressing outrage at Karen's behavior. The HOA board was under scrutiny, and many residents demanded that she be removed from her position. For once, the rules and authority she had clung to so desperately could not protect her. The very community she had tried to control was turning against her. recognizing that human decency mattered more than strict enforcement. Mariah watched Ava draw pictures on the porch, each stroke of the crayon a small act of healing. Her daughter's laughter, quiet but genuine, reminded her that life could continue after trauma. She held Ava's hand and felt a flicker of hope. This was more than survival. It was a chance to reclaim peace, to show that love and resilience could overcome fear and cruelty. That night, as Mariah and James tucked Ava into bed, they exchanged a quiet look. Words were unnecessary. They had faced chaos, but their bond was stronger than ever. Their home, though temporarily scarred, would become a place of safety again. And in that realization, Mariah felt a sense of triumph, not over Karen, but over the fear that had threatened to take root. The events of the morning would not be forgotten, but they would not define the Johnson family. Together they had weathered a storm, and together they would continue to heal. The neighborhood might whisper about the incident for weeks, but Mariah knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was protected. She was loved, and she would never let anyone harm her family without consequences. By the following week, Willow Creek was buzzing with whispers and concern. Word of Karen's attack had spread quickly through the neighborhood. People who had once nodded politely at her from across the street now avoided her gaze, some openly shaking their heads in disapproval. The HOA board, under pressure from multiple residents, had begun reviewing Karen's position. It seemed the very rules she had wielded like a weapon were finally turning against her. Mariah, still tender from the pepper spray incident, sat on her porch with Ava playing nearby. She had received messages, phone calls, and visits from neighbors offering support, flowers, and homemade meals. The kindness overwhelmed her. For days she had felt fear and isolation, but now the warmth of the community wrapped around her like a protective blanket. She realized that despite one person's cruelty, most people in Willow Creek cared deeply about right and wrong. James joined her, his uniform still crisp even though he had spent the week helping Mariah recover. He watched as neighbors came by, offering smiles and hugs, and he could see the relief and gratitude in Mariah's eyes. "See," he said quietly. "People care. We're not alone." Mariah nodded, feeling the weight of the past week lift just slightly. It wasn't gone. Her eyes still stung at times, and the memory of Karen's attack lingered, but she felt a spark of hope. Residents began sharing their stories, too, about how Karen had previously intimidated others, always hiding behind rules to assert control. But now the community saw her for what she truly was, someone who had crossed the line. Conversations that had once whispered fear now echoed with courage. People began to discuss fairness, respect, and accountability, and slowly, the neighborhood transformed from a place of quiet tension to one of unity. Mariah decided to speak up, not with anger, but with honesty. She posted a message on the neighborhood forum, recounting the attack and its impact on her and Ava. Her words were simple but powerful. She told the story not to shame Karen personally, but to remind everyone of the importance of kindness and human decency. "We all have rules," she wrote, "but rules are meaningless without heart. Stand up for each other. Protect your neighbors. Treat everyone with respect." Responses flooded in, full of encouragement and solidarity. Neighbors praised Mariah's courage and promised to hold each other accountable, to ensure that the neighborhood remained safe and compassionate. Small acts of kindness followed. Someone fixed a squeaky gate for her. Another brought over fresh bread, and children waved and called out greetings as Mariah and Ava walked outside. Each gesture, though small, reminded her that love and community could heal wounds faster than fear and cruelty could create them. Even the HOA board reached out, apologizing for not addressing the situation sooner, and assuring her that Karen would face consequences. The words were not empty. They carried weight because they were supported by the voices of the neighbors who had finally come together. Mariah looked at Ava, her daughter drawing a colorful picture on the porch, and felt a rush of emotion. Her daughter's resilience mirrored by the support of the community, and the unwavering strength of James gave her hope. She realized that the attack, though traumatic,
had also revealed something beautiful, the strength that exists when people care for each other,
the courage to stand up against wrongdoing, and the bond of family that nothing could break. That night, as the Johnson family sat together, they felt a quiet triumph. It was not loud or boastful, it was simple, deep, and lasting. They had survived, they had healed, and they had inspired change. In a neighborhood once dominated by fear and rigid rules, kindness and empathy were beginning to take root. Mariah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the week lifting. For the first time, she believed that justice was not just about punishment, but about people coming together to support what is right. And in that moment, she felt a peace stronger than fear, stronger than pain, and stronger than any HOA rule Karen could ever enforce. Weeks passed since the attack, but the memory of that morning remained vivid in Mariah's mind. Every time she glanced at Ava, she remembered the fear in her daughter's eyes and the helplessness she had felt herself. Yet alongside those memories, there was growth, strength, and a renewed sense of hope. Willow Creek had changed, and so had Mariah and her family. Karen Whitmore, once the unquestioned authority of the neighborhood, now faced the full weight of her actions. The HOA had removed her from her position, and several residents had signed complaints against her. The police had documented her assault on Mariah, and the possibility of legal action loomed. She no longer commanded respect. She commanded whispers of disapproval and pity for her arrogance. Karen had realized too late that cruelty and fear could never replace human decency. Mariah, sitting on her porch with Ava on her lap, reflected on the journey. The neighborhood that had once seemed intimidating now felt warm and supportive. Neighbors greeted them with smiles, waved from across the street, and offered helping hands without hesitation. The same streets that had witnessed fear now echoed with kindness. Mariah understood that one act of violence could not define an entire community. It was the collective response, the compassion of neighbors and the strength of her family that shaped their world. James joined them, his hand resting gently on Mariah's shoulder. "We did it," he said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Mariah turned to him, feeling the depth of their bond strengthened by the ordeal. "We survived," she replied, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "And we're stronger because of it." Ava leaned against her father, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm not scared anymore." Mariah's heart swelled. That single sentence, spoken by her daughter with quiet bravery, symbolized everything they had endured and overcome. Fear had been replaced with trust, courage, and love. Over the following days, Mariah began to speak publicly about the incident, not with anger but with a desire to educate and inspire. She shared her experience at neighborhood meetings, emphasizing the importance of kindness, empathy, and standing up against abuse. Her words resonated deeply. Residents who had once felt intimidated by Karen now found courage in Mariah's strength. They realized that one person's attempt to control others through fear could be overcome by unity and compassion. Even Karen, in her isolation and humiliation, became a silent lesson to the community. No rule, no title, no authority could justify harming another person. The story of the attack and its consequences spread quietly through Willow Creek, a reminder that true power comes not from intimidation, but from respect and humanity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mariah and James stood at the edge of their yard, watching Ava play with a group of neighborhood children. Laughter filled the air, pure and free, erasing the shadows of that terrifying morning. Mariah felt a profound sense of peace. Their home, once the scene of pain and fear, was now a place of safety, love, and joy. James pulled Mariah close, resting his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we have each other. That's all that matters." Mariah nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, not tears of sadness but of relief, gratitude, and triumph. They had faced cruelty, chaos, and fear, yet they had emerged unbroken. That night, as Ava slept soundly between them, Mariah looked out the window at the quiet, peaceful street. The neighborhood had healed, and so had they. Karen's actions could not undo the love, trust, and unity that had been strengthened in the aftermath. Mariah realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was facing fear and standing firm, protecting those you love no matter the cost. In Willow Creek, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but the story of that morning lingered as a powerful reminder. Kindness, empathy, and strength of character always triumph over cruelty. Mariah, James, and Ava had survived, and in doing so, had left an indelible mark on their community, a mark of courage, love, and justice. And as the stars twinkled above their home that night, Mariah felt a deep, unshakable truth settle in her heart. They were safe, they were strong, and nothing could ever take that away.